Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Hi. Welcome back to Phil's geometry class. And we've got a few things that I want to take you guys through today. Should be some pretty interesting stuff, I hope. So first of all, I've had a few questions lately from people asking about my book and my courses and stuff. I do have a course called The Etymology of Number. If you're really interested in this work, and I'm seriously only touching on a tiny fraction of what we've discovered out of this work. I'd say probably about less than 3 or 4%. But if you're interested in work, I do have a course called The Etymology of Number. Several people on this class have taken that course. This class is also nice because it includes some of my more new work. But if you want to get the basis kind of all of it and the ongoing effort of it as well, beyond the quarantine period, then I highly recommend taking the Etymology of Number course. It is on the Resonance Academy. You can also access it on my website, robertedwardgrant.com. And also, if you're interested and you want to go beyond that course, that first course has some homework and some things associated with it, but it's really condensed. It is really intended to take you on the journey of the alchemist and the philosopher. So it's not pure mathematics, although you'll learn a lot of math about it, and you'll end up learning a lot about the language of mathematics as well. That's a universal language of consciousness. And then in addition to that, for those that complete that course, then you can go on to the language of light, which is the more advanced course. And I bring in some other guest speakers on it, et cetera. And it's also pretty fun and goes into a lot of detail as well. I'll probably be doing more coursework. I was probably going to start another course here in the last few weeks and months, but with coronavirus, I thought I'd just go ahead and do this with you guys. But the amount of new work coming out every day, literally, is kind of mind-blowing in and of itself. So basically, for those also that want to get a closer look at this work, people ask me all the time if they can buy some of my artwork or whatever, and I don't really sell my artwork, at least I'm not as yet. I might do something with all the art that I've drawn here on this course and do something to give to charity or something. I haven't really fully thought it through yet because I've been kind of too busy working on other stuff. But I do have a book that you can find also on my website on the store, Robert Edward Grant. And basically the book includes all of my, it's called The Mirror of Consciousness. And the book includes kind of all my artwork up until, the major ones anyway, up until I'd say October of last year. And so I'm about to next volume, which I already have probably 300 to 400 new pieces of work that will go into the book. But basically, it includes my art, and it's all in high-res, highest quality scans you can possibly do, and also all the mathematical work and discovery effort that I personally have been undertaking. I never thought anyone would be interested in this type of stuff. And then I started posting it online and people started saying, hey, can I buy pictures of your notebooks? And I thought, well, why not? Sure. And so I went ahead and had this made and published it with a company that does a really good job on this type of stuff. I'm not really trying to make money on this. I'm just trying to not lose any money on this. This is not what I've chosen as my profession. But basically, I do want people to be able to access it if they want to access it. And that's kind of how I've done all of my stuff. Everybody can access any of my work. It's just they have to choose that they want to access it. This is actually the pattern that I found the prime number pattern on. And I was following, kind of the encouragement in some ways of Nikola Tesla also on 3, 6, and 9, and was looking at a pattern that I found within the same number series that relates to electromagnetism, gravity, time, and energy. You guys have seen this already. This is a picture of the brain and how to turn on through balancing the mind. And the way you balance the mind is think of it as a receiver, as a muscle, and each aspect or each location of the brain has a different role, right? So the back of the brain is art, on the right side. On the left side, it would be science. Then you've got music and mathematics over here, and language at the center, and geometry is close to the center as well. And so what happens is you end up having to strengthen your entire brain as a receiver, and then it turns on the entire brain. And it's through the balance of the mind, through understanding each of these. It's kind of like working out one part of your body doesn't work if you want to be a good athlete. You have to work out in balance all the body, and then you'll get peak performance. So anyway, I won't spend a lot of time on this today, but just wanted to show you what this book is. And you'll recognize some of the concepts in here, from periodic table to mathematical equations, new approaches to mathematical equations, and sometimes entirely new concepts like the fractal root that we talked about in the last class yesterday. And these are the original notes also that I took on coming up with these concepts like this as well. So, and also I do have some pyramid work in here as well, looking at math constants and their 1 over x values and how they interrelate with each other, and how every math constant's 1 over x is also another math constant, and everything is connected. This one I'll save for another day, but I do want to go over this with you guys, that one thing I found was that the square root of 2 plus the square root of 3 equals pi. And you might say, well, 3.14, yeah, that works, but 3.14626, why is there a difference? Well, I broke down the difference and analyzed exactly why the difference is there and what that difference is and the role it plays, and it relates to 14 over 7 in this particular case, but I'll save that for another day. So now let's go ahead and go into today's class. So this is a picture that I drew, I guess in November, and it's from the Star of David and from Metatron's cube as well, as you can probably tell. And basically what is so unique about it to me is that it literally looks like it's coming off the page to me, right? I don't know why I have the sun coming in every day right at this time. It didn't used to do that. So hopefully you guys can still see that. There you go. And so I've been trying to hunt this light thing, where it's coming from, because it's obviously bouncing off of different things in the room, because I don't have any direct sunlight on it, and I don't know where it's coming from. It's very bizarre. Very bizarre. Anyway, but the thing that I wanted to show, the reason why I wanted to point this out to you is how you can draw in perspective. And this literally looks like I could jump on this as a path and go to the next and go to the next and go to the next, off into the horizon, into infinity. I'm going to teach you how to draw this today. So this is going to be one of our exercises today, how to look at the world around us, because straight from this very simple two-dimensional form, we've got something that looks like it's really alive and coming out at us, right? So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about dimensions in general today. So today I posted a post on Instagram. I did not post it on Facebook yet. Let's see if I can move this a little bit, because the sun is coming at us. Let's see if I can do this. I'm trying to do this so you guys can see it. All right, it's probably as far as I can move it. Okay. So we have here, and you can see today I also figured out a way to get the people on Facebook to be able to see this straight up. If you don't like it, it's fine. You can always, figure out how you want to play with it going forward. But let me know if you could see it okay. So basically what we have here is dimensions. So we often hear in the spiritual community discussion about dimensions, right? And what does that mean? Is it just sort of like a funky way to describe a spiritual experience in one context? Does it mean something else altogether? And how does it relate to my experience today? Well, I wanted to deconstruct this, and so I did, among all the other things that I was working on. And I wanted to deconstruct it in a way that I could understand both mathematically and logically, because, maybe we're all experiencing some changes in our own dimensional perception, and we may not even know what that is or how to even recognize it. So I want to take you first and foremost through these dimensions. And yesterday I talked about perimeter and also circumference being measures of the first dimension, because effectively what you're doing is you're taking a circle and you're just lying it flat and measuring it as a flat item, right? So it's we measure everything with a ruler, and this is a first dimensional measure, right? We can move it this way to make it also a second dimensional measure, but ostensibly that's what we're doing. We're taking a circle that has a curved line, making it flat. We're taking a square, taking all the pieces of it apart and then laying them next to each other as line segments. And then we're measuring it as a first dimensional measure. And so the first dimension is perimeter and circumference, and that is measured in units. Now, units, let's just say this. I don't believe that any unit of measure in and of itself really matters. I don't believe any mathematical constant in and of itself really matters. What matters is its relationship to other units and other measures. So I'll say that again. What I mean by that is that you could take a value of pi, and that is going to scale exactly proportional to the diameter or radius of a circle. So basically, pi just becomes a relationship to the diameter of the circle, right? Or radius. So if that's the case, then it's dimensionless, because it's just in comparison with everything else. So I started thinking more and more deeply about this and started realizing that actually all of numbers are just relational to other numbers. So whenever you find those relationships that show up in geometry in particular, they're going to have some significant value, because it's going to relate to, let's say I start with the flower of life that has a radius of 2 units, or 3 units, or 4, or 2.5 units. It doesn't matter. Every time the circles will overlap, it will create another emergence of a math constant based on the relationships. It's all ratios of each other. So we have the first dimension, which does this. The second dimension now, we go from having only a line, and now we're going to rename this line the x-axis, and we're going to name the vertical line the y-axis, right? So you might remember this from school. So basically the way we measure this is we measure it through area. And the way we measure an area is we're going to basically count and see how many units of measure is it going to be. Let's say it's 6 units vertical and it's 6 units horizontal. And so now the x and y axis will then give me a total area value of 6 times 6 equals 36. Now this is the second dimension. And every time you'll see that this to the power of 2 is defining the second dimension, right? The power of 1 is defining the first dimension. And so because we are defining it in the terms of power of 2, we also have to put the units squared at the end. So you could have 6 inches and 6 inches, so you could have 36 inches squared is the value. Now, you could think of this as all polygons, all squares, all circles that are in 2 dimensions that you're looking at that are flat. And you could call it a still frame with no depth. So there's no depth. So what I just showed you the picture with this pathway off into the horizon that has all this perspective to it. That's an illusion of depth. It's an illusion that's been created off of a 2-dimensional page, right? But it's not real depth. It really looks like there's depth, but it's just an illusion to our minds. And it's a still frame. That means it's not in motion. It's not moving. Okay? So what's a third dimension then? The third dimension is now still a still frame, but it's a still frame with depth associated with it. Okay? And then you have not only the x and y axis, which is measuring the width right? And the length, just like over here, width and length. Now, I'm trying to mess around with this light coming in on my desk here. So you've got length, width, and now we have a depth. Now this is interesting because I haven't measured this angle, but I'm going to guess this angle is about, so this would be 90 degrees right here. And I don't know about you guys, but I can only see this now as if there's true depth to this, because my brain is sucking on this illusion and it's saying, okay, there's depth here because of the way this line is drawn. If I drawn this line right at 45 degrees, it would still look like 2 dimensions. But because I drew this line at 72 degrees, it opens some portal in my perception to another level of dimension or depth. Now, this is exactly the reason why the Metatron's cube can create the depth perception that we have in three-dimensional drawings, because we use that 72-degree line to create exactly this phenomenon. There's something with 72. But now, in order to measure this, we have to measure 6 units this way, 6 units this way, and then it should be 6 units going back this way or forward this way, which would then mean 6 to the third power, which would give me an area of 216 units. Okay? So then that's why I basically depicted this with a cube, but it's still a still frame with depth. And these would be all Platonic solids, all Archimedean solids, all cubes and spheres, right? Maybe if I increase the light on it, that will actually help, or put some shade on it anyway. Okay. So then, what's the next level? What's the fourth dimension? Well, the fourth dimension is going to be measured as follows, right? So there's length, there's width, now there's depth, just like from the third dimension, but the fourth dimension is really measuring motion, right? So you could say that this is where the still frame picture went to like a motion picture, a motion of sequential frames, but one at a time. So you're experiencing one picture at a time, okay? And in order to depict this, there is no measurement for this yet, except for one we call time itself. The way it would be depicted is 6 to the fourth power. So 6 times 6 times 6 times 6 would give us the range on time, probably why our time system is based on 60s. Now, what's interesting about this is that I'd noticed that if I take 6 to the fourth power, it gives me 1,296 units to the fourth power. And a compass actually has, and I said in one of the previous classes, that the compass is probably the true measure of time. And the compass actually possesses, for thousands of years now, 1,296,000 seconds around it. So you've got 360 degrees, then you have 60 minutes and 60 seconds. So 60 times 360 times 60 equals 1,296,000. So interesting that we've created a fractal here of thousands, right, that relates to the compass itself and probably relates to the same phenomenon of how time works. So in this realm, we have now not only cubes, but these cubes are in motion. They're moving, right? So we have hypersolids, hypercubes, hyperspheres, because everything's in motion. Nothing is ever stationary. It's impossible to have anything remain stationary. I'll try and move this back over this way now since the sun is coming that way. Okay, hopefully we'll be out of the sun now for a while. So now we understand the fourth dimension, and again, I wrote in here, motion and time in one direction, and belief that the past creates the future, right? Or maybe that there's complete, happenstance, that there's no association between the past and the future. But in general, people will say, okay, if you go to school, you do well, then you'll probably set a path of success in your life. And so the past becomes at least a good predictor for the future. It may not determine the future in many people's minds. But in this model, it's kind of set up because it only goes one direction. We always believe in the forward motion in time, right? They say that the only thing you can count on in life is death and taxes. Okay, well, that's because time is going to get anybody, right? And when you think about even the Garden of Eden, and when God came down, spoke to Adam and said, Adam, what have you done? And Adam says, the woman that thou gave me and commanded that I should remain with, she gave me of the fruit of the tree and I ate. And he says, Eve, what did you do? And she blames it on the serpent. So they both blamed it on others because shame always is accompanied by blame. Whether it's blaming ourselves silently and then we push it out to somebody else, because normally when somebody puts blame on somebody else, it's always because they did the thing that they are blaming the other person for. I'll repeat that. If you spot it, that means you got it. That means if you're blaming somebody else for something that happened, that means secretly inside your own mind, you're blaming yourself. And when you're blaming yourself secretly in your own mind, that builds up as karma. And that shame and baggage that you're carrying has to be resolved at some point in time. So in this world, though, time only goes in one direction. So therefore, time is always running out. And yet it's an illusion because it's infinite. It's just not infinite for us. When God spoke to Adam, he said, look, the day that thou eatest of the fruit, the day that thou eatest of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, of duality, knowledge of good and evil, thou shalt surely die. Now, Adam didn't die the same day, but what God was saying is you're going to start the process of dying. You're no longer going to be immortal. And so that was important because that's when gravity came in, and dying is associated with the grave, the gravity, the grave. In French, we say c'est pas grave, which means, it's not so bad, not so serious. Grave means something really bad, right? It is grave, a grave, gravity. Okay? So now as we go into the fifth dimensional frame, it's all the same stuff. So each dimension still has all the pieces from the last dimension, but your perception now changes. Because it's like seeing, once you see a third dimension, you can't unsee the third dimension. You're used to seeing the third dimension, but if you were going to describe it to somebody who believed that everything was flat, it'd be really difficult to describe. So I tried to do it this way for fifth dimensional understanding. You have a motion picture, but the motion frames are all running simultaneously. Now think of it as a Netflix landing page where all of these are different time realities, right? That are all accessible by you. And you could choose which one you want to actually put your focus on, because all realities of time would run simultaneously, right? So the motion pictures are actually going at all the time, and you could simply access those different frames. That's how people like Nikola Tesla referred to the fact that he could see the past, present, and future all at the same time. Da Vinci said the same. So that means you've got the past, present, and future all running simultaneously like separate films, and you can access the ones you want to put your attention on. And this leads to an understanding that the past and now and the future are all, in fact, the same thing and can therefore be experienced simultaneously. This is a higher level understanding, and it leads to an understanding that the future is just as much a player in creating the past as the past might be a player in creating the future. Now, I believe everything is entangled. Everything's entangled, so that means it's actually set. But in effect, what this is basically allowing us to see now, seeing past this dimension, means that you could see that time is not always running out, because time itself is an illusion. It's an illusion that it only goes one direction, when actually you could see and experience different dimensions of time simultaneously. Now, I know this is hard for people to put their brains around until you experience it. And once you do experience it, then all of a sudden your whole world changes, because you're like, wait a minute, how could this be? And I can tell you, I have experienced it. So this is a different mindset. So if you think about our world today, it is built on a world of scarcity. It is built on a world of, what are all the things that would drive commercial capitalism, right? Think about it. If I want to drive commercial capitalism, successful commercialism, I want to learn how to exemplify and embody the notion of buy low, sell high. So what are the cheapest things in the universe? Well, the cheapest things in the universe are probably also the most valuable because you don't pay for love, right? Money can't buy me love. But when you start thinking about assets, the stuff that has the most value is always going to be associated generally with that which is most scarce. This is why we go through education systems like we do, because we've been taught from a very early age, well, you better go to college and you better do this because, you know, you need to be able to get the most amount of money for your time. And so in order to get the most amount of money for your time, you should pick a profession that a lot of people would like to go into, but has very difficult time to get into it, like being a doctor or a lawyer or some advanced degree or something, because then you can charge more for your time. And everything runs off of time. So time becomes the ultimate arbiter. It becomes the crux, right? The foundation stone of all concepts of scarcity. That means gravity has become the foundation stone of all concepts of scarcity, because gravity and time are essentially the same thing. And so if you kind of go a step further and think about this and say, okay, well, what about land? You know, land is also scarce, and so that has value. Well, yeah, because people would say they're not making any more land. And the reason why land is expensive also relates back to time, because it's the amount of money someone's willing to pay to have utilization of that land for whatever their purpose is while they're alive, because it doesn't matter when they're dead. You can't take it with you. So also it's this concept that you only have one life, and when you die, you don't go anywhere. You're done. You're finito. So that drives also this, sort of economy of scarcity. Well, we could take something like water. And we could say, okay, I remember meeting the CEO and founder of Fiji Water in Fiji, Gaia, Fiji. I stayed at a place there for about a week or so. And I met him, and I have to tell you, it's amazing to me how the water companies have made as much money as they have. Here, the most abundant resource on the planet has been an illusion has been put around it for us all to believe that it's scarce. So we basically take water and we put it in a bottle, and we say that it's running out and there's not going to be enough for everybody. So then we sell it at a higher price. And that's what we call capitalism. Now, I'm not a communist, but I'm just saying, I have to be able to parody the entire economic model that we have. Because business itself is built around fooling people into believing an illusion of scarcity instead of believing the reality of abundance. Because the earth is a closed loop system. We can't ever run out of water. It's impossible to run out of water. Every time somebody uses the water, it goes back into a self-replenishing system, and it can be used again, right? And I've been on aircraft carriers where, they produce 50 million gallons every day of clean, drinkable water from ocean water every day. So it is totally possible, but we place it in a bottle and we charge ridiculous amounts of money for something that is the most abundant resource on the planet. So you have to compartmentalize it to be able to charge higher money for it. And that's what industry has done. And if you look at it, that's what we've done with everything. We do it with dollar bills. Dollar bills are units of scarcity, and yet it's an illusion that it's scarce. It's total bullshit. What's happening right now with the liquidity being pumped into the market is a perfect illustration, an example demonstrating that fact. We can print money anytime, and we call it monetary policy. That's why Bitcoin has probably done so well, is because they created something that was more than just a false scarcity. They basically created something and said, look, we'll never be able to print more than 21 million coins. And 21 million coins is the most anyone could ever mine. And they created a fake, value system around that as well, very smartly so, by saying, okay, we're only going to issue something like 15, I don't remember the exact number, 13 or 15 million. and then the rest are going to be mined. And so the amount of time that it takes, and it takes so much energy and time to mine Bitcoin, that's going to establish a trade value for Bitcoin. And that's essentially what happened, because up until the 1970s, there was only gold that would back currency, or silver or precious metal. And then 1973, we had something called the Bretton Woods Conference, and Nixon led the effort to break the world of the gold standard. The gold standard went away in 1973, replaced with what we now know today as encryption. Because it's the only thing that protects your money, because your money doesn't have any gold backing it. Your money is simply on a computer ledger, and it's through debits and credits on SWIFT. SWIFT is a transfer system that's basically used to transfer money back and forth. So, and if anyone could just print money anytime, like every government is right now, then how is it scarce to have money? It's not. Again, it's an illusion of scarcity. And I could take you through every single thing and show you how time is the root of the scarcity, and that limited perception of time is the root of money as well. Because how do we get paid? We get paid per hour. We get paid per day, right? And very rarely do people in society get to a point where they can create companies that work without them working. And I can say this, that the people that do create those companies work so much and take on so much risk. People that have never started companies have no fucking clue what it's like. Try it and see if you have the same perception of it. Seriously. It is so not the story that you read about or hear about in, oh, this great success story. For every success story, there's probably 95 failure stories. So I have deep, deep respect for entrepreneurs. I was a professional manager for many years, and I thought, oh, that's easy. Come on, I'll just go do that. Oh my gosh, was I ever wrong? So changing this perception is no different than changing your perception to see this X, Y, and Z axis here from 2 dimensions that it clearly is, and deciding to see it in 3 dimensions. Seeing the 5th dimension and experiencing it is, first and foremost, knowing that you can access it. It can be accessed. It's already there. In fact, not only the 5th dimension, but every other dimension is embedded within the dimensions around us. It's just that our perception is limited. It's not that the world around us is changing through this global shift. It's that our perceptions are changing through the global shift. It is up to each of us to change our perception and access what is our right to access. And the only one to blame for it if you don't is ourselves. So, now we're going to talk about the mathematics of time. So you could say there's past occurrences, present happenings, and future possibilities. So prime number multiplied by another equals a semi-prime number. Now it's interesting because we have 4 ways that we use in basic arithmetic, right? So in basic arithmetic, we have a plus sign, we have a minus sign, we have a multiplication sign, and we have a division sign. Have you guys ever thought about this more? Do you think this is purely arbitrary? First of all, how are these similar? Wait a minute. All I did to make a multiplication is turn it 90 degrees on its axis. That's interesting. That's fascinating. Now, what about this? What else does this relate to? Well, there's another symbol that I turn 90 degrees, and it's percent. And by the way, how do you derive percent? You divide one number into another number. All of this stuff, again, this is another example of multidimensionality around us, just like talking about the radius yesterday, the radius, that's all around us that we just take for granted. We don't even notice. And it was there all along. By the way, along with new dimension comes new mathematics. That's why mathematics And physics is exploding right now. Literally exploding. I read a paper last night written by Wolfram, the guy that makes that made the website, the Wolfram Calculator website, which I use all the time. Thank you, Mr. Wolfram, Dr. Wolfram. And he wrote his theory of everything and left, some pieces out so that the rest of the world could participate in it. But what he wrote that I read last night, I'm blown away. It was pretty damn genius. There were elements of it that I don't 100% agree with, but all in all, probably 90% bang on right. So if you really want to see a theory of everything, the beauty is it's going to be all around us here very soon. It's part of this global change in perception. And once your perception changes, what you experience changes as well. Because in life, we attract everything that we judge until we no longer judge everything that we attract. I'll repeat that again. In life, we attract everything we judge until we no longer judge everything we attract. I gave this TED Talk on replacing fear in your life with gratitude. And my next TED Talk will be how to replace judgment in my life and all of our lives with acceptance, non-judgment. So even these things are judging, right? Because we're judging this is only a two-dimensional thing, but if we look at it from a different perspective, maybe it's 3 dimensions. We're judging an object that's solid is fixed and immovable, right? Like this. This is sitting here on my table on top of my book, right? It's fixed. It's immovable. Now, don't ask me how this thing broke on the inside. This was like 5 layers, and the outside was totally unscathed. I took it to Egypt with me, and it was totally unscathed, and then somehow the center ones all broke, except for this ball in the center, which is kind of bizarre. But actually, this is moving too, because we're all moving. We're moving at 67,100 miles per hour. 67,100 miles per hour. That's how fast we're going around the sun. That's 10,000 times slower than the speed of light itself. 10,000 is not that much. So when you think of it in these terms, that we're moving like a gimbal, right? We're going omnidirectionally, right? We're spinning around this way and we're going. And our entire solar system is going through the solar system at about 500,000 miles per hour. This thing is never stationary. It's only an illusion that it's stationary. It's only an illusion that we have forward-only time. It's only an illusion that we die and we never come back after we die. Death is just another reentrance. It's just a beginning again. So we have these different math equations. Well, guess what? There are many other equations coming too. There are combinations of these. Plus, right? And multiply. So I'll give you an example of what I mean. 5 plus 9, right? Plus 5 times 9. So this would be an example of multiplication combined with addition. So this is a sum of 2 integers, and this is the product of 2 integers. Now what does this equal? 5 plus 9, right? 5 plus 9 equals 14. 5 times 9 equals 45. Together, and they equal 59. Whoa, wait a minute. Aren't those the 2 numbers I started out with in the beginning? What if I did this with 1,022 plus 9 plus 1,022 times 9? Guess what? The result is 1,022, 9. Try it on your calculator. This will always work. It also works for every other integer. So there is clearly a connection between sum and product. It's one of the ways I solve how to do this equation backwards. there is an entanglement between the sum of the same two integers and the product of the same two integers. And we don't even use this as a mechanism for addition, subtraction, or we don't even think it is relevant. And yet it clearly is. I could do this also with 8 and 5. It just manifests differently. So 8 plus 5 plus 8 times 5, right? So 8 plus 5, 13, plus 8 times 5, 40, 53. 5 plus 3 equals 8, right? And 5 right here. So basically 5, and then add the two together. The first digit is the one added to and multiplied by 8. And then you add the two together to get the other two. So you're back to the 5 and 8. This is fundamental mathematics that, frankly, it's just outside of our zone of perception. And as we break through higher realms of understanding, there'll be more and more relationships and more complex. It'll be seemingly more complex math, but actually it's simplistic and beautiful at the same time. So this is a math equation that could be associated with time. Now it's interesting that we say, A plus B equals C, and that we use A times B equals C. This is telling us it relates to time. So you could say past occurrences, present happenings equal future possibilities. But this is known as a one-way street equation. But what about this equation? C equals A times B. How can you solve this? Now, normally, you remember in algebra that if you have something like A times B equals C, as long as you know 2 out of 3 input variables on the equation, you can solve the third. But if you don't know at least 2 and you only know 1, you cannot solve the third, right? So if I know this and I know this, then I can solve for B. That's easy. But if I don't know either A or B and I only start with a number, how could I ever solve for what A and B could be? Well, that actually is like knowing how time flows backwards. And it is equation as well. It's an equation too. And actually it's very simple. We discovered how to do it. And we can do it consistently and very fast. And this is the foundational basis upon which all encryptions are based. So all encryptions today are based on, you could say time itself is an encryption, by the way. Time is an encryption, or at least the forward concept of time is an encryption that keeps us from higher understanding. We have to break out of time to understand the abundance that's on the other side of the scarcity, because it's always there. So how do I solve this? Well, I discovered that you could take a number like 35, and these are always prime numbers. If they're always prime numbers, there can only be one pair of prime numbers. So if there's one pair, then it's fixed and entangled. There can be no different past and no different present to equal a future. It's destiny. Or maybe we could say that destiny is just a word we call the free will of the higher self. That's a larger discussion. But so you got 35 here. What are the factors of 35? Well, there's 2 prime factors of 35, 5 times 7, right? Well, normally the way you would solve this is just because you know 5 times 7. That's something you memorize when you're in 3rd grade. But actually, there's another way to do it. And this is one of the things that I discovered, which is 1 over 35 equals 0.0285714, 285,714. Now, isn't that interesting? Because basically what this is now doing is it's creating a wave that goes infinitely like this. These 6 digits just keep repeating. This is called a repeating rational number. And the peak of the wave is 5 and 7. So that means that when I see 35, I know it's a semi-prime. I run its 1 over x value. I know at certain points on peaks of waves, I can find its 2 prime factors. And we've been able to demonstrate that. And it's an entirely new way we call reciprocal factorization. It's mirrored reciprocity. And it's simply through the 1 over x value. You could say this is the DNA of a number. So this has very, very big implications in encryption, why we had to make an entirely new encryption, because we knew that this could no longer be the mechanism, and this is the same mechanism that's been around since 1975. So what this does now is it brings us to this universe of numbers. Okay? And I'll end on this, and we'll finish this in the next lesson, but I'll end on this and then go into drawing a little bit and show you how to do that. So the universe of numbers. So we have discrete, we have continuous. So continuous means infinite, discrete means fixed. It has a discrete value, right? So for example, here are the different types of numbers. So perceiving the non-duality of numbers, there are 3 kinds of numbers. One is discrete. So an example of a discrete number would be 1, 2, 4, 5, 8, 16, 32, 64. These are all the numbers that have their x value is fixed at a value, and their 1 over x value is finite as well. So in other words, 1 over 2 equals 0.5. 1 over 4 equals 0.25. 1 over 8 equals 0.125. And in all doubling math sequences, and 5 has a special role here, it's like a wild card number, because it can play in both these categories. But basically, for all these doubling math numbers, 128, 256-bit, 512-bit, 1024, 2048, 4096, these are always discrete numbers. That means their x and their 1 over x values are always fixed values. You could say that discrete matches particle and discrete particle. So these are what we would see as this illusion of solidity. Then we have, in the second type of number, we have discrete and we have continuous, which is infinite. So here, 3, 6, 9, 7, 11, and all the prime numbers and semi-prime numbers fall in this category. They always have a 1 over x value that is infinite, but they're called repeating rationals. So it's the same digits that repeat. Now, sometimes when those numbers are really, really big, you can't even notice that they're repeating because there's so many millions and millions or trillions of digits in them, but they're all ultimately repeating. That's the nature of them. Then the third type of number are the mathematical constants, which would be pi and 1 over pi, which are both infinite. Long tails. These are the verbs. You could say these are the verbs. Verbs of action in the language, right? These would be like the nouns, right? And pronouns and all that. So these verbs of action create all the geometries of the universe. This is where the waves overlap based on those ratios. And there'll always be infinite number series all the way through. And that's why they play such an important role. There are an infinite number of mathematical constants. In fact, we could say that our understanding of math constants is similar to our understanding of dimensionality. When you get to here, there's only a fixed number of math constants that we think we understand. But as we get to the higher stages, then we'll realize that the number of math constants is infinite, and how they're all actually just reflections of the same numbers just based on ratios. They're all connected. They all emerge and come back to the number 1, ultimately. So basically, this is what we have here. 3 different types of numbers. And this also, I believe, the differentiation between wave-particle duality. So when we look at numbers, we only see a number like the number 7, for example. But actually, the number 7 is both a fixed value rational number, right? It has rational characteristics, and it also has an infinite, because it's a prime number, it has an infinite 1 over x value. So it's wave. You could put particle over here, and you could put wave over here. So everything in the universe comes back to numbers. Pythagoras, Plato, they all said all is number. And if all is number, then we have to be able to explain particle physics and wave dynamics with numbers, and it already does it. Numbers already have this delineation between the two. How beautiful is that? So I'll move off of that now and go to how to draw something like what I just showed you. And many of you, since you've already been in this class for a while, you know how to do this. You just may not think that you know how to do it. And in this context, all the knowledge that you gain in your life is actually just remembering, in a sense. Because all dimensions of time are embedded in every moment. It's just we're only perceiving this forward motion of time right now because we've limited our perspective to that. Maybe we haven't even started to look outside of that. So what do we do to draw this? Right? It's very simple. We do the same thing with Metatron's cube. Just like we normally do. And then we start drawing lines. And all these lines of perspective are inherencies to Metatron's cube, which you'll see in a moment. So experiencing higher dimension then, and how that impacts your daily world, the synchronicities you see. Are you tapping into a morphogenetic field of information, which they're... That's another thing. Knowledge is power in the old paradigm. No, knowledge is a right in the new paradigm because anyone who opens their mind to it can access any bit of information they want to access because it's all inside the morphogenetic field. So we're going to draw these lines of Metatron. And that first line that is so important to perspective is the same I just showed you on the XY axis, right? Which is right here. The reason why this thing pops out in all of a sudden three-dimensionality is because I'm drawing these two lines, first and foremost, right? So now all of a sudden I've got something that looks like it's kind of already tilted at me because this is the same as the Z-axis line that I just showed you. If I put another line right here, right, here's my 90 degrees, here's the Z-axis. That's why we always use a 72-degree line to describe a Z-axis because it automatically makes us see in a third-dimensional perspective, right? Now, I'm also going to use the lines at the bottom, but I won't use any of the other lines on the sides here because I don't really, I mean, I can use some of it, but I don't need to use all. So now I've already started to build out how I can start to see this kind of step thing coming out at me. Right, so, and I'm going to take this and go to this one right here too. See, now you can start to see already dimensionality starting to pop into this. It already looks like there's steps coming up, doesn't it? That's kind of trippy, no? Okay, so I've got an extra one here, and I'm missing one. Now I can always just connect these as well, like this. Okay, and I can do the same thing right here. And you know that when you're crossing over something at this line where they're going to be meeting, then just like I just did right there, see that crossover point? And let's see, I can put another line here. So now I could go smaller and smaller on this, so it looks like it's going off into a horizon. Now, that's how to get dimensionality in like the matter of a few seconds. Look at that. So now we already have here this dimensionality, so I can start connecting this to make it look like I can bold it. Remember, bolding it gives you that added perspective. So it looks like I'm taking stepping stones off into the distance. And like some sort of path has been made for me to go off into some horizon I don't even know where it's going to take me. Maybe, hopefully, I'll choose to trust the universe because I realize that it doesn't really matter, because at the end of the day, it's all fixed. Which, by the way, is very opposite to what I've taught before. Because I was the epitome of the, I can make things happen type of a person and thinker, right? So I'll give a little bit more perspective on this. You'll notice that whenever you cross this line here, you're also going to be joining another line over there. Kind of the nature of drawing like this. This is the framing type stuff that Da Vinci did on a lot of his work, right? And of course, you can then use some shading and stuff to like make it look like this path is separate blocks, kind of like that. See that? And this is a technique you can use on regular art that doesn't have to be even geometry related. In fact, that's what Da Vinci did. He would create this illusion of dimensionality in his paintings in such subtle ways, and that's one of the things that made his art so amazing. So, and I could keep going on this if I wanted to go further and further off into the horizon. Just keep going up like this. Right, so now I just have another step that I could basically frame. And I'm going to have to go here in a moment. We'll run out of our hour. There you go. Have a great day, everyone. Much love to you all. The next dimension is only as far away as you decide it will be. It is simply a matter of changing your view and perspective from one of scarcity that relates to lack of time and running out and everything being lost and death and all of that jazz, to one of making the best of every situation around you that you find yourself in, and finding the abundance and the silver lining, because literally, if it is the will of your higher self, the director, then that's what you will experience. And we're here to experience life, because experience is the one thing that can't be taken from us. We have to experience. Experience, not good enough just to take a test. It's not good enough just to make a commitment. We actually have to experience it, because that is how we learn. Have a great day, everyone. All the best.